Well, the New York Times is freaking out because we got our October surprise, and it's that the country sucks under Kamala Harris. And that's what they're so worried about. Not just the hurricanes, not just the war, but it's the economy, stupid. Here, the Times is saying that the hurricanes, the strikes, which are now old news, the war economy, all bad narratives for Harris. And in fact, that's true. What's worse, though, is that inflation numbers out today are not helping. Now, economists had hoped that they would be lower than they are, and the numbers don't follow the campaign narrative. The Harris campaign, though, keeps repeating the economy's good. The economy's getting better. That's what she told Stephen Colbert just this week. But that's not what the numbers show. And it's not how Americans feel. So let's look at the new inflation numbers. They show 2.4% inflation in September, which is higher than economists were hoping for, which was 2.3%. Only energy costs have gone down over the last 12 months. But when you remove energy, inflation is closer to 4%. And the Brown Institute points out that the government metrics for inflation suffer from various problems, which tend to underestimate the rise in prices over time. They say that these shortcomings have been more pronounced over the last 4 years because of a relatively rapid depreciation of our currency. Can you argue with that?
No,
I don't think I can. Now, the bit of the economy that the Biden-Harris campaign, or the Harris campaign, continues to brag about is joblessness, that joblessness is down. But that's because of added government jobs, which means the Democrats have grown the size of the government, which we expected, which means the federal deficit will continue to balloon. They have no plans to cut spending whatsoever, full stop. So how can the Harris campaign answer to this for undecided voters that see and feel it? Well, here's how the Times expressed their not so subtle worry that you can't package this in a new face and get away with it. It says, Miss Harris, a long a risk-averse politician. I could argue with that.
She's risk averse.
But I'm not going to. Okay.
Okay.
She has tried to both claim Mr. Biden's accomplishments as her own while defining herself as the future and the 81-year-old president as the past. She barely mentions the president's name in her campaign speeches and makes a middle-class pitch that aims to correct for the inflation and high prices voters blame on Mr. Biden's economic stewardship. This week's events thrust Ms. Harris' balancing act of being both number two to Mr. Biden and atop the ticket in her own right back into the spotlight. The scenes of striking workers, hurricane devastation in the southeast, missiles over Israel are unwelcome complications, they say. It's trending poorly for her. Reality that they created is bad for her. And again, the debate, let's skip down a paragraph, says the overlapping developments just as the calendar turned to October is a reminder that while Ms. Harris has framed her candidacy as a fresh start for the nation, she's very much a part of the administration still in charge. And it quotes Donald Trump saying, the world right now is spiraling out of control. Can you argue with that? Do you not feel it? And in fact, the Brownstone Institute tries to go even beyond the government published data and control for all manner of things, such as deregulation, housing prices, insurance premiums, income growth, and GDP growth. Those are not factored into the price index. And they find that inflation is woefully insufficient to measure just how badly it's been over the last 4 years. And they say we've been in a recession since 2022. They conclude, I encourage you to, this is a dense article, and that's why I put the title here so you can find it for yourself. Because what they conclude is that the cumulative inflation since 2019 has been understated by nearly half, and the economic growth has been overstated by 15%, which is huge for a 5-year period, even compared to the 2008 crisis.
Yeah, so even if you account and say you take energy out of the equation, right? And you take energy out of the equation, which puts it at their fake 4%. 4% is terrible, but the actual number is closer to 15%.
That's not what they're saying. They're saying they're overestimating the growth of the economy by 15%.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they conclude that the effect of inflation has been understated by half.
Understated by half. So then,
right.
Okay. And if you take out energy,
that doesn't give you an inflation number. It just means that they've been understating it. So every month you could possibly double that.
Right.
That's one way of looking at it. The numbers are more complicated than for me to just summarize for you. That's why I gave you the headline so you can read it to yourself. But the big conclusion is that when you make all of these adjustments, we've been in a recession since 2022, and that is exactly how the American population feels. It tracks with what voter sentiment is because it's true, and the Democrats are trying to gaslight us about it. Now, what these wars, though, will make worse is a gas crisis, obviously. Now, economist Peter St. Onge said that this could lead to a 1970s level oil and gas crisis. Watch.
Indeed, just in the last 3 months, oil prices had dropped from $86 a barrel to just $66 as jobs numbers trumpeted the coming recession. But all that changed on October 1st when Iran launched nearly 200 missiles at Israel over the Hezbollah offensive, sending oil soaring more than 8% in a matter of days. So why did oil soar? Because one thing the Ukraine war showed us is it's really easy to destroy energy infrastructure, even for a third world military like Ukraine, meaning Israel could turn off Iranian oil exports at will. Now, on paper, Iranian oil exports are large, but they're not that big. Formally, they're number 16 in the world at about 900,000 barrels exported per day, which is just ahead of the UK. But that 900,000 is just a fraction. So last year, Bloomberg estimated that Iran actually exports over 3 million barrels, most of it illicit, to get around U.S. sanctions. That would put Iran at number 6 in world exports, just under half of what Saudi Arabia exports. Of course, it's not just Iran. The country of Iraq exports even more oil, and it has, thanks to the U.S. invasion that empowered Shiite militias, become deeply aligned with Iran. So Iraq is staying out of the fight for now. But if that changes, perhaps because Iraqi popular opinion forces it, we could be looking at a Saudi Arabia worth of oil coming offline. Now, the last time that happened was the 1990 invasion of Iraq, which drove oil prices from $41 a barrel to $94. The fun does not stop there because any war with Iran probably means they close the Persian Gulf by blocking the narrow Straits of Hormuz. That could, in theory, deliver something closer to 1970s oil embargo when inflation-adjusted oil went from $25 to $152 per barrel.
Okay. 1970s level gas crisis where you cannot actually run your economy or even get to your job because there's no gas in your town. We could, in fact, mine our own gas. We refuse to because idiot environmentalists keep suing the Biden administration to stop that. So,
oh, don't worry. They'll release the strategic petroleum oil reserves.
You think?
Which is what the Biden administration did, of course, last year, and then never replaced them. And so they're still at record lows. And he said he was going to replace them at a much lower and cheaper price, which is not the case.
Okay, we're still waiting.
We're still waiting. Yeah.
And if you are listening to whether or not Kamala Harris will prevent a war with Iran, I have not heard that yet. I am listening to that. What I hear is that she wants the war in Israel to end, yet she also wants the U.S. to march along on the leash of Benjamin Netanyahu and facilitate, in fact, provoke a war in Iran and Lebanon. So she says she will not even speak with President Putin about peace in Ukraine, keeps repeating all of these lies about Putin's goal to have all of Europe, which, by the way, is the stupidest thing to say. People put that on my social media, and I'm like, what an ignorant stooge you are.
Like,
First of all, read
Putin's
more
gonna
books.
Take over Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how large? First of all, do you know how massive Russia is? Do you think they need any more land? Do they need any more resources? And they want to take over Europe?
Yeah.
It's absolutely asinine. And
It's the dumbest thing ever. So, those people can go back to CNN and just trade headlines instead of reading books. But don't come crying to me when your child is drafted for a war you know nothing about and your 401k tanks because you partner with the government to fund a war economy, you matrix slave. Where was I? Trying not to fight with assholes online. Okay.
I like when she gets feisty. No, I know. It's hard. It's sometimes, and people say to me, Clayton, don't interact with the trolls. I know. Yes, occasionally you get a troll and it just like gets under your skin. And you're like, is that person that stupid?
I really try to rise above it, but I don't always.
It's hard
I'm
not
going to
to
admit that.
Yeah, it's
okay.
Hard. It's hard.
Oh, back to why this narrative is bad for Kamala Harris. That's what we were talking about. And don't think I'm letting Donald Trump off the hook. He absolutely seems to be willing to do the exact same thing as the Democrats are going to do for not having peace in the Middle East. But what we're talking about right now is the economy that is stuck to Kamala Harris like a kick me sign on her back. That's what we're talking about. Now, has this hurt her? It seems like it has. Here's a betting site showing how this October condition, maybe not a surprise to the rest of us, but a surprise to the campaign, has shown her campaign tank. Now, there's a lot to see here. First, it does show her winning the popular vote by 72%, but it shows her losing swing states such as Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania by quite a lot, actually, narrowly losing Michigan and Nevada, and in a dead heat for Wisconsin. But notice how she had a lead in the odds right after the nomination was ripped from Joe Biden. So what we're looking at is when she took over the campaign in August and had that boost from being new and fresh, right? And seems to have squandered it since. So, you know, this initial boost, she's lost it precipitously, and it continues to be lost in October. Will this continue to happen? Who knows? And let's not bank on it. It's just one poll from a betting site, which typically tends to be a bit more reliable than media sites. We don't know. And it's still 26 days from the election. Anything can happen because we are fickle consumers of news, and sentiment is just bounce around like crazy. We don't know. But it is interesting to note that before these numbers, and before the hurricanes, and before the strike, and before the October 1st escalation of the war in the Middle East, the Times had been kind of hoping that the October surprise was no surprise. Well, this headline's dated October 8th, so this was after Iran's attack on Israel. Nevertheless, what they seem to be hoping is that there's no October surprise and we just get through it. And maybe that's one sentiment I share, is that my nerves are shot. I don't want any more surprises. I just want to take this to the polls already.
Well, also look at this picture here. I mean, and in our next coming up here, we're going to talk about this, like this fake alien invasion. Like they're pushing for this very, very soon. And you're starting to see, we've been covering it here on the show, this idea that we're going to see a World War III moment, and then suddenly missiles are going to be shot out of the sky. People were sharing videos over Israel last week of these missiles being shot out of the sky by mysterious craft. And so what better way to unite us all than with a fake alien invasion that is run by the military-industrial complex? It brings us all together. We give over all of our civil rights. We give over all of our civil liberties like we did after the 9/11, like under the Patriot Act. So there's a number of sources that we've been speaking to. These are whistleblowers who are talking about this, that be aware of an October surprise of a fake alien invasion.
Right.
To scare us all and unite us all. And then guess what? We can be locked down once again, and we can turn over. And by the way, it's all about continuity of government.
The October surprises were not true. Like, those things were not a manipulation of reality or any kind of distortion. It was George Bush did get a DUI. Hillary Clinton was investigated by James Comey.
Yeah.
Trump did have COVID. These are the real October surprises. So now they're sort of showing you, like, if you see anything that's an October surprise, it's probably fake news. It's probably right-wing nut job conspiracy stuff. Like, it's not real. So don't put any stock in it.
The Y-Files, the Project Bluebeam. I mean, it's kind of like laying that out. Like, this is exactly what was talked about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea of a fake alien invasion is all about continuity of government, as our upcoming guest is going to talk about here. Because when you then take away, when you have this like invasion that we need to all now be locked down because of, and they control it, there's a continuity of government that takes the president of the United States out of the equation, and it puts it in the hands of NORAD. And NORAD then becomes the controller of the United States. It becomes the de facto president of the United States. So then we are then under sort of a martial law, and we lose and sort of give up all of our civil liberties. And that's exactly what they would love to do. That's exactly what we did after 9/11 with the Patriot Act. So it's not ridiculous at all. I love that photo, though. I mean, I love that they chose a UFO for that. I mean, they're literally preparing us for this.
I didn't see it that way, but I see what you're saying.
I mean, just listen to these whistleblowers who are talking about this and warning about it. Pay attention, people. We're not crazy. And by the way, all of these, we are, but we have to be, right? The crazy ones, like we have to be, because all of these conspiracy theories have come true. Yeah. All of these quote unquote conspiracy theories have now come to pass. So anyway.
Well, we're crazy for doing the work we do. I think that we like that all the time. Like, can I just go back to being a matrix slave sometime? Can I just not know?
Can I go back to my teenage years?
Yeah. So
really?
I feel like that makes me crazy, but we're here.
Tom Brokaw is telling me that this is the way it is. That's got to be the way it is.
Between his 2 martini lunch up in NBC's 30 Rock.